Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Perspective right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thank you guys so much for joining. We have an amazing show for you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. I really am excited to bring you Mr. Aaron van Wirdum, but before we introduce him, let's go ahead and get to the links, guys. Please find our links at CryptoCast.network, where you'll be able to find our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, and all that good stuff. Of course, we also have our merchandise if you guys want to help support the show, and our QR code at the bottom, because this is a community-driven YouTube channel, community-supported YouTube channel by viewers like yourself. And we actually got a few more tips the other day, so we really, really appreciate you guys supporting the channel. We're really having a great time over here. And of course, we are also having our Programming with Bitcoin.com interactive two-day workshop, where we will be teaching C# developers how to work with the NBitcoin library. That is taught by both myself and the creator of the NBitcoin library himself, Mr. Nicolas Doye. He's, of course, the creator of other projects as well, like BTC Pay Server. And so we'll definitely be getting a little bit into that, into the course. And we'll be trying to take this across the country. So right now we're scheduled for San Francisco on October 13th and Seattle November 3rd. So with that aside, let's get right into the show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Stop screen share and introduce Mr. Aaron van Wirdum. Aaron, which is the technical director of Bitcoin Magazine. How are you doing tonight, Aaron?
I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Oh, doing pretty great, man. Really glad to have you here. We actually we're discussing your article on the Bitcoin News Show last Sunday, and so probably could have had you there, but I didn't think about it in time. I kind of chose those topics the last minute. So I'm really glad to have you here now, Aaron, to be able to talk a little bit more detail about this article. So the art. Really glad to have you. So
glad to be here. Good to discuss my article. Thanks for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Of course, you are one of only two people that we trust in the space these days in the media. You, of course, and Kyle Torpy. Kyle, of course, doesn't seem to be writing too much anymore, but, we definitely have you continuing to pop out content, continuing to create these great articles. And, BitcoinMagazine.com is still one of my favorite, news sites for Bitcoin news of all time. So that's still really, really awesome. So really glad to have you be writing there. So the article that we're going to be talking about tonight is called Bitcoin Privacycoin Tech, making Bitcoin more private. So Bitcoin as a privacy coin. So before we get into the article, let me ask you, Aaron, what made you write this article? What promoted? What was the thinking behind this? And was it the timing of all this technology coming out? What drove you to create this article?
Yeah, it is the timing, but it was actually based on a tweet by Adam Fiskor that was also mentioned in the article. Like he made this tweet where he kind of summed up all of these privacy tech that's coming up. And that did make me realize that it seems like this is getting into for a long time there were all sorts of privacy proposals that were ideas that people would talk about, and there was like a potential for Bitcoin to implement that stuff one day, or some stuff got implemented a little bit, or then it got stuck in alpha, like dark wallet or that sort of stuff. And now kind of finally it seems like there are all sorts of technologies popping up, like actually being implemented, actually being rolled out in a wallet. So that's very exciting to see. I think that's very important.
Awesome.
I think a lot of the developers who are working on this stuff, I was talking to one of the Samurai guys, and his sentiment was like, they've been so distracted with all of the scaling, not the scaling war, basically, right? The scaling debate, however you want to call it. That was such a distraction for all the developers and these guys, developers in general, because they had to think about, problems with replay protection, or then you had all of these users claiming their Bcash, and then you had this was just a huge distraction for everyone. And it kind of seems that now finally the focus is back on privacy, which is at least as important as scaling, I would say. Andreas Antonopoulos said it very well when he said, privacy is more important than scale, in the sense that you must build privacy on the base layer, really, because you can build scale on second layers. But privacy, that's much trickier to build that on second layers. You kind of need that on the base protocol in some way.
Yeah,
so
actually,
I kind of think that is a bigger priority, and then we can scale after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry to interrupt you, because I do want to get to that too. I'm going to actually ask you, about your opinions about that on privacy on the base layer by default, things like
Yeah.
that. But before we get into that, just so the audience is aware, basically this is going to be a little bit of a technical show tonight. A little bit maybe more technical than normal because I have my other show Deciphered that's actually designed to be more technical. But Aaron, I need a special show just to put Aaron on because we get to both of these categories at once. Writing articles and technical, because Aaron in fact does write very technical articles, or at least covers very technical things with these articles. And so we're going to kind of combine it a little bit tonight. So if you guys aren't ready for that, get ready. We're going to talk about some technical stuff. But before we get into that, before we get into the hardcore technical stuff, Aaron, let me ask you this. On a side note, I did see that you were at the Lightning hackathon over there in Berlin just recently. Yeah. And so, I would just like to ask you maybe a little bit, how did that go? And, maybe what was your most exciting thing that you saw there?
That was fun. I thought it was a really fun event. That was a very I wrote an article about this as well, and I think one of the themes that was sort of part of that article, and that was also my experience, is that it felt like the sort of old school Bitcoin kind of vibe, like Bitcoin before it blew up, Bitcoin before, or definitely before like all the blockchain and ICO stuff and all of that. Like it was sort of people who came to that event came there because they actually like the technology and they want to experiment with the technology, and they were messing around, creating funny apps, or that was cool to see. I was very excited to see Electrum is coming up with a Lightning implementation as well. I saw a demo, seems to work. Electrum is a big wallet, so they're gonna have a Lightning option. I think that seems like a big deal to me, so that's cool. And pretty soon as well, like within a couple of months. In general, just very, very good atmosphere, lots of excitement. It was a nice event. I had fun.
Yeah, it's great to hear that because I saw the live stream and it looked like a lot of people were very excited and a lot of great discussion going on. Like it was, noisy almost the whole time outside of the presentations, right. Everybody talking and discussing and exciting. It's almost like the early days of Bitcoin. I think you said, like, it really is, really is exciting to see all these new technologies, Schnoor on top of Lightning, getting into some pretty exotic stuff. I guess there was a lot of fun little things there, like being able to pay for candy with Lightning and being able to pay for drinks and stuff with Lightning. They had some stuff both on mainnet and testnet there, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, I took a photo. Like there was a photo booth with Lightning, like a Polaroid photo kind of thing, and you could play games where you could. I didn't play the game. I don't know what the point of Lightning was there. I think you could earn. like it's Satoshis or something. It was like a Super Mario game where you could collect coins, but I'm not even sure what actual Lightning implementation was there. I just saw it from a distance.
Sure. Okay. Very cool. Well, all right. Let's switch gears here. Get into the actual article. Let me ask you the first question here, Aaron, of the list I have here. In your opinion, in general, how is the privacy tech coming along in Bitcoin, and how far away is really most of the technology that you write about in your article? Is this stuff, super far away, 2022, 2024, or is some of the stuff being able to happen right now, or maybe as early as next year?
Yeah, no, the whole, like, the point of the article specifically was technology that's coming up, that's either new, like with recently deployed, or that is at least implemented, or they're, Schnoor is probably the furthest out, but at least there's like a BIP, and it needs to be concrete. So this year or the next, reasonably. That was kind of like if to name an example of something I left out is pay to endpoint, which is a relatively new proposal, which looks cool, but there is not really an implementation of it yet. It's not completely clear that it's going to be implemented or how, or that sort of. So I left that out. It had to be concrete. It had to be something that we're either able to use now, since a couple of months, or we'll be able to use before, at least before the end of 2019.
So it sounds like, yeah, I mean, as we discussed earlier, one of the main reasons you wrote this article is because you see all this stuff on the horizon, right? You're starting to see this stuff come into fruition, and like you say, early as next year. That sounds pretty promising to me.
Or it's already here.
Yeah, or it's already here. So that's really great. So let's get into a little bit of that. So let me ask you, what then is the one of the top technologies that you see in here? What is maybe one of your favorite ones that is coming right down the line?
I, I guess Zerolink. Zerolink would probably have to be. That seems like a very powerful, useful thing that we really kind of need. Like that's a way to mix coins without needing to trust anyone with your privacy or with your coins. That seems like a very important thing that we really need. And
let me ask you this, Aaron. Yeah, let me ask you this. Let's get into Zerolink just a little bit. Maybe you could, for the viewers, describe what Zerolink is.
Yeah, so it's a framework for CoinJoin. I think that's or for Xiaomi and CoinJoin. I think that's the way to describe it, right? So CoinJoin is a trick first proposed by Gregory Maxwell, where users can combine their transactions into one big transaction, right? So if I'm sending coins to Alice and you're sending coins to Bob, then we can merge this into one transaction, and then it's not clear which of us send our coins to Alice and who of us send it to Bob, assuming we're using equal amounts at least. Now, in the case of Zerolink, CoinJoin is used as a mixing strategy. So up to 100 people, or exactly 100 people, I think, basically all merge their coins into this huge transaction. So it's a huge transaction that sends coins from 100 people to the same 100 people back. And because it's merged into one transaction, it's not clear who's paying who, or like, you know, it's not even something you can establish. It's just one transaction, you know, coins in, coins out. Everyone got new coins basically. So that completely breaks the history of transactions. That breaks the history of coins. So since you don't know which coins you're getting back, no one is able to tell what happened to these coins in the past. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you wrote here in in the article is that the trick is to combine several transactions into one bigger transaction, right? Obfuscating which bitcoins are moving from which sending addresses, the inputs, to which receiving addresses, the outputs. So that seems very, very, very important. That's going to be a way to thwart chain analysis companies who are trying to figure out who's sending what to who with all of these various transactions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Awesome. So yeah, so this is a pretty powerful one. Are we seeing this being used? Like where are we? Are we seeing this being used? And if so, where are we seeing this technology being used right now?
Well, so it's mostly Wasabi wallet. So this is the wallet recently released in beta by Adam Fiskor. But it's in beta still, so it's you gotta use the command line still, and it's not really something you can download on your Android phone yet. But it is being used. I like, if you follow his Twitter account, his Twitter handle is nopara73. That's nopara73, and sometimes he'll tweet like volumes of how many mixes are going on, and it seems like it's actually being used. So yeah, and then in a couple of months it's going to be released out of beta, and that will be an actual desktop app with GUI, and so at that point it's even easier for regular users to mix their coins.
Awesome. So yeah, the future is looking bright then for privacy. So that's really, really cool. Before we get into the another technology, because we have a few in here, that was the Chaumium CoinJoin and Zerolink. So again, Zerolink is this network, this privacy network by default, right, where everything is encrypted, so that nobody can, for example, track your IP address. So
that's Zerolink is what we just discussed, the mixing, the coin.
Sorry. The Zerolink is the mixing service, and then the CoinJoin is the technology behind it, first proposed by Gregory Maxwell. So this stuff, as Aaron says, is being used actually right now in Adam Fiskor's NoPower73's wallet, Wasabi wallet. So that's really cool. So before we get into another technology, though, let me ask you this, Aaron. Do you see a need in the future for other privacy coins when we have some of this amazing technology like what we're seeing here, like what we're discussing tonight?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually writing, like, this month, basically, in light of this cover story, I'm writing a series of articles on different privacy coins, and the sort of theme is, how do they compare to Bitcoin? Like, do you actually need privacy coins anymore right now? What will the future look like? And I like what I've been so far. I think Bitcoin is actually doing relatively well, if better than I kind of expected. If you use Bitcoin in the most private way, and which will hopefully be something that's going to be easier and then will improve over time, that Bitcoin actually does pretty well. There are some drawbacks. For example, privacy is not default. You know, in Monero it's default. Even users who don't care about their privacy are part of the anonymity set, which isn't the case in Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, you know, a potential problem is that mixing itself could become something suspect or something, you know, detrimental. You may prefer coins that don't have a mixing past, don't have a mix in their past or something like this. So that's a very nuanced point. I kind of like, if I just give you a straight answer, I think Bitcoin will probably be private enough for most use cases and for most users and for most cases, most scenarios. And then maybe in the sort of niche cases where you really need the extra step, the privacy coin could come in. That's kind of how I see it now. But maybe Bitcoin can even improve to the point where privacy coins become useless over time. But that's probably long term.
So it sounds like long term, then, you know, Bitcoin's privacy tech is what most people will need. They really won't need something beyond Bitcoin tech, because maybe it'll be, you know, default at the application layer so that people can just start using it. For example, if they're starting to use Lightning, then maybe
there's something. Yeah, Lightning is a good example where privacy is default, even on Bitcoin. It's not a base layer solution, so it's still, you know, it's still not perfect, but at least then on Lightning it's sort of default, and that's already a big step. Then with something like Schnoor signatures, you could maybe, or probably, incentivize using CoinJoin. So that's another step in privacy. Then there are potentially solutions like pay-to-endpoint, which would also break certain assumptions without increasing cost. If you sort of add that all together, the shifting incentives towards privacy, the second layer privacy, you know, maybe you're opening channels and closing channels in big CoinJoin transactions where it's fine to use equal amounts because, you know, it's just a funding transaction. It's not, you're not in the store paying a specific amount. It's just funding your channel. If you add that all up, if you combine all of that, I think you can get pretty far. Like, Bitcoin could do pretty well privacy wise.
Awesome. Okay. So very interesting stuff. It does sound like, you know, there's a lot of privacy tech on the way. So maybe we can switch to the next privacy tech I'd like to maybe discuss in your article. Maybe you can go over a little bit because in your article it says the next one is Schnoor signatures for CoinJoin and more. So maybe you could go over a little bit about what Schnoor signatures are and how they can be useful in a CoinJoin situation.
Yeah, so Schnoor is a different kind of signature algorithm. Bitcoin right now uses ECDA. Am I saying that right?
I always get it wrong. It's like ECDSA. I think that's what it is. ECDSA.
I got it wrong.
It gets cryptocrazy. Elliptic curve cryptography. Yeah.
Okay, so Schnoor is a different one. It's generally considered better by cryptographers, or and it has a bunch of benefits which have to do with the mathematical properties of these signatures, which basically allow for more math to be performed with these signatures. So a concrete example for Bitcoin is that signatures can be combined. So usually for every input, every coin that's included in a transaction, It's not every coin. It's like every chunk of coin, every input that's included in a transaction requires one signature. With Schnoor, you can combine that into one signature for the whole transaction. So that's less data heavy. So that's cheaper to have it, it confirmed in a block by a miner. Now, CoinJoin, as I explained, combines different transactions from different people. That also includes all sorts of different signatures. That's possible now, but one reason it's not widely implemented is probably that it is a hassle to implement, and there's not a huge upside to using it for users who don't care about privacy, right? If you don't care about privacy, you're probably not going to use it. With something like Schnoor, if you can combine the signatures in a CoinJoin transaction and therefore make the whole transaction smaller, the whole transaction should be cheaper. Therefore, even users who don't care about their privacy would be incentivized to use a CoinJoin transaction simply because they want to save on fees. So that incentive could well lead to wallet developers or wallets implementing this stuff because users are asking for it. Whether that will actually happen, we'll have to see. Schnoor itself isn't implemented on the Bitcoin protocol yet. It would be a soft fork. If the SegWit saga is any sort of indication, it could take a while. Or maybe this time it will be very fast. We don't know yet. But it is a soft fork, so that it's hard to say how long this is going to take before everyone's on board and the miners are activating it. But if that happens, then that kind of lays the groundwork for interesting stuff, including this shift of incentives in favor of a more privacy favorable solution.
Okay, awesome. Maybe you can talk a little bit about scriptless scripts or Taproot and Graph-root that that Schnoor actually enables. Just briefly, just for the audience, because so far we learned that Schnoor signatures, aggregate up to thousands of signatures right into a single signature. So that's really great for both efficiency and for privacy. But then also, you're right that it enables stuff like scriptless scripts, Taproot, and Graph-root. So maybe you can talk about that because that is again more privacy technology.
Yeah. So to be honest, I haven't looked closely into Taproot or Graph-root, neither. I sort of understand the gist of it. Scriptless scripts I've looked into a bit more, but basically the essence is that you can hide values in signatures. So a signature is just a number, right? It's a seemingly random number. Now with these tricks like scriptless scripts, you can sort of hide a number in these seemingly random numbers, which does something, basically solves some off-chain puzzle, right? So let's see if I can come up with a concrete solution. So I think the central or the main example is usually atomic swaps, where a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain would unlock a transaction on, for example, the Litecoin blockchain. So this is possible now, but right now it would be obvious what you're doing. And with these, with stuff like scriptless scripts, and I think Taproot and Graph-root, they do sort of all similar way of thinking about these things, is that you hide a number in a signature which just unlocks something else and does cool stuff. So it enables smart contracts while the transactions just look like totally regular transactions. There's no analytics company that can tell this was a smart contract, this was like some kind of futures contract, or this was an atomic swap, or it just looks like a regular transaction. So wow, if you want to,
that's pretty powerful.
It's pretty cool. If you want to get into the actual details, I'll have to you'll have to excuse me.
No, 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 no. That's okay. We don't need to get into too technical details, but really it sounds like to me that, that scriptless scripts are going to enable pretty complex transactions that while making them look like normal transactions. So we're talking like you could do crazy awesome multi-sig transactions or very complex exotic transactions, but then have them look like just the regular transaction on the network, which again prevents more of this chain analysis. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one thing it does. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really, really cool. So scriptless. So that was scriptless scripts. So we were talking about how privacy might not work for people if it's not enabled by default. So maybe we can get a little bit into that. So let me ask you, Aaron, this. Most people aren't really using privacy right now. We're seeing people just use centralized exchanges. We're seeing something like Zcash only have like maybe 10% of actual shielded transactions. We're seeing these types of things. So let me ask you this: do you think that privacy needs to be available by default at the base layer protocol? Now, this isn't talking about applications specifically at the application level, just at the actual protocol level and at the base layer. Do you think that privacy needs to be enabled by default?
I think it would be ideal. That would be ideal. I just don't think like right now Bitcoin doesn't offer that, and I think it's going to be very hard to implement that in Bitcoin. That's near impossible. I think. I mean, you could always do some kind of hard fork, but I don't see that happening for Bitcoin. Unfortunately, I guess. But if you can, like I explained with the Schnoor signature stuff, and if you can at least shift the incentives towards privacy, that's a pretty good step.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean that's the idea, right? To shift at least maybe people's mindset to start using privacy, and I'm hoping that privacy will be enabled by default at the application layer. Something like something built into your wallet that's enabled by default, and then you would have to go to the options and remove privacy in order to not take advantage of that. So that's what I think. That's what I'm hoping for. And of course, when you combine that privacy by default at the application layer with something like Lightning. Well, then we're talking, that's a pretty good amount of privacy, good enough amount of privacy enabled by default. What do you think?
Yeah, like I said, I think you can get pretty far if you have the incentives in the right place. If wallet developers actually implement this type of stuff, I think we can get pretty far. I mean, ideally, I would probably prefer to have it on the base layer by default, but it's probably not something we're gonna get.
So let me ask you, what about these mixing services? So, Francis Pulio is on the show all the time on the Bitcoin News Show, and he's talking about how he's hearing services that are starting to just mix by default. Mix everybody's transactions by default that come in new. So for payment processors, for billing, for all that stuff. What do you think about having payment processors mix transactions by default? What do you think about that for privacy and maybe from a regulatory standpoint?
Hang on, I don't understand this proposal. You mean a payment processor like BitPay, or?
Yeah, so similar to BitPay. So let's take BitPay for example. So what if a payment processor like BitPay by default, mixed all of their customers' transactions? Do you see that as ever being a possibility?
Well, BitPay right now just cashes out most of their Bitcoins for dollars and pays out dollars, right? So so I'm not sure what kind of benefit. What am I missing?
Okay, well, so it was just talking about to try to enhance people's privacy by default, try to enhance people's privacy where they don't have to do much additional work. So, for example, the payment processor, like I say, that is handling incoming Bitcoin transactions and outgoing Bitcoin transactions, perhaps mixing those so that in a specific customer or specific merchant can't easily be found out by chain analysis exactly which transactions are going in and out of their company.
I mean, in general, of course, it's great if all companies would do this sort of stuff. That's very clear. The problem is that especially these kinds of companies are relatively easy to regulate. So we probably shouldn't count on these companies to protect our privacy. We should do that ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. I would much rather trust ourselves and the open source developers than centralized companies to handle our privacy. So, very good point on that, Aaron. So let's maybe move on here to our next technology that I'd like to discuss, which is Stonewall. Maybe you. So this is another technology that you've wrote about in the article here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this.
Right. Yeah. So Stonewall is it's a kind of a CoinJoin inspired trick. So as I explained, CoinJoin is this trick where different users merge their transaction into one transaction, which is useful. Stonewall doesn't do this, but they pretend to be doing this, right? So they have an unusual amount of inputs and an unusual amount of outputs, which makes it seem as if it's a CoinJoin transaction. So at that point, an analytics company that's actually studying this proposal or that's studying the blockchain might think that it's a CoinJoin transaction. So it's maybe not the biggest privacy enhancement possible, but the more you can sort of throw sand in the how do you say this in English?
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So what you have written here is that Stonewall transactions are in effect regular transactions. They send Bitcoin from one user to another. However, Stonewall transactions do something odd. They include an unnecessary number of sending addresses inputs and change addresses outputs. So that does obfuscate, right, more of the transaction, creating more privacy, creating more difficulty for chain analysis companies.
Yeah, you're basically fucking with the. Can I say it online?
Well, we try to keep it slightly family friendly, but we all know that there's really no kids watching this.
Yeah, you're basically messing with the chain analytics kind of companies. That's what you're doing. They're looking at the blockchain. They make assumptions based on certain transactions and what they look like. And the more you mess with that, the harder you're making their job. That's the idea behind Stonewall. So it's a neat little trick to make it harder for them, and to make it harder for these companies to establish what's an actual CoinJoin transaction and what's not.
So this would
that also helps like CoinJoin users, because
sure,
if you're messing with them.
So would this in effect then also require, for example, chain analysis companies to have additional hops in order to, or even for a regular, a company who's using a chain analysis company to, for example, maybe check if a coin is quote unquote dirty, would this require them to have more hops to be able to go through?
No, I don't think so. That's actually the same guy Summerwall that does have another trick where they add hops to transactions you make. So, for example, I think a company like Coinbase, they will, if you send money to Coinbase, if you send Bitcoin to Coinbase, they will sort of check the blockchain for, I don't know how many hops, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3. I'm not sure how many hops it is, but I look at the blockchain for a couple of hops to see, was an address in the past associated with a dark market or a gambling site or whatever they're looking for. So these samurai guys came up with a type of transaction where they just add hops, like you're basically sending money to yourself a couple of times before it goes to Coinbase. So then again, you sort of mess with Coinbase's analytical tools, and then for Coinbase to counter that, you just have to they have to in turn look back for more hops, which is getting exceedingly difficult the more hops you have to look back. But I think with Stonewall doesn't necessarily do the same thing. I think it's kind of or maybe.
Well, it's definitely something similar, and it makes it more difficult for the chain analysis companies, and that's what makes me happy, Aaron. That's what makes me happy. I want to create as much difficult for those type of companies as possible, as much difficulty as freaking possible. So let's just I just wanted to recap the actual estimation of when these things are available, because I didn't mention. So for Chromium CoinJoins, that's here basically available now in beta. The Schnoor signatures with the CoinJoin is optimistically 2019 for the Schnoor signatures, and then the Stonewall is again available now, and in maybe hopefully other wallets in the next month or two. So So that's going to be really cool. So everything sounds like it's coming along pretty quickly here. So let me ask you, let's switch gears. Let me ask you another question here. And I think we can wrap it up after that, maybe. Let me ask you this, Aaron. Do you see regulation as a threat to this privacy tech? Or do you see like a window for privacy tech to get into Bitcoin? And if so, do you think we'll get most of this tech in there before we have some type of regulatory scrutiny or friction?
Good question. I actually hosted a privacy panel at Breaking Bitcoin. No, it was called Building on Bitcoin this year in Lisbon, and I asked this question to the panel, which also included wallet developers and it's hard to say really how strict this stuff could be regulated, how hard regulators would want to regulate it. The kind of general takeaway was, at least for example, Electrum, Thomas Voegelin, he feels that privacy technology is great, especially if it's not presented as privacy technology. So something like the Lightning Network is ideal. Like Lightning Network is presented as something that offers fast and cheap transactions, but at the same time, it actually offers privacy as well. And at the same time, if you implement something in your wallet that's sort of specifically meant for mixing, or you call it a mixer, that could lead to more iffy scenarios, maybe. But there's no concrete example of this having happened yet. So it's speculation. There's no wallet developer who's had to go to jail or anything like that. So and the Wasabi wallet guys, they did change their name. Their name was Hidden Wallet previously, so they did pick a name that wasn't targeted towards sort of privacy or anonymity kind of stuff. But they apparently have actually looked at what's legal, what's not, what can we do, what can't we do, and they seem very confident that what they're doing is actually perfectly legal and fine. So I hope they're right, and so far so good. No one's being arrested.
So it sounds like the regulation towards some of this privacy tech is taking maybe a soft approach right now. They're not throwing people in prison for using Chaumium CoinJoin transactions yet, is what you're saying, I think.
Well, yeah, okay. So there's definitely, as far as I know, no users who are being arrested for using any of this. I was more thinking about the actual wallet developers or the guys developing this type of stuff. And that,
that's a good angle too. Yeah.
That seems fine so far as well.
Okay. That's good.
But like I said, it's probably trickier. Like it's probably for an open source project, it's probably easier to implement this type of stuff compared to a company or a regulated exchange. Or we've seen blockchain, for example. The blockchain info. They removed some privacy enhancing stuff in the past. We don't know why. We just know they removed it, and we know they're like a big company that probably has a lot of contact with regulators. Maybe. So who knows? We can speculate, but we don't know for sure. Open source projects. Meanwhile, there's Wasabi Wallet, also something like a decentralized exchange, BISC or something. It's probably a little bit harder to regulate that kind of stuff, but yeah, so far so good. That's all I can say.
Yeah, so I mean, because we are seeing a bunch of decentralized exchanges out there that, well, at least a couple anyway, that seem to be doing okay. From a regulatory standpoint, I think I totally agree with you. Where the people that are going to be using or creating some of this software, I think for the most part are going to be open source developers. You're not going to be able to get funding, raise and get a company together and build something like Monero. That's well, I guess they sort of did with Zcash, but that's not that's something different. That's not really the same. For example, something like Grin or something like that. I think that could never actually be approached by a traditional VC. So yeah, it does sound like, you know, we're going to see more and more of this stuff from open source developers. Now, I can give another example, like, you know, for something like Nicolas Doyer, you know, I think he's a good example of one of these people that are creating these open source projects for everybody to use and white label. And, you know, so for example, with BTC Pay Server, I don't see maybe a company that could create something like BTC Pay Server. This has to come from the open source community. This has to come from people who care about the ecosystem at large, right? That cares about the well-being, the future well-being of both, you know, the community and the token and the network itself. So maybe you can comment a little bit on that real quick.
No, I agree. I think you know, the more established you are as a company, and also the closer you are to fiat, the easier it's for you to be regulated. So, you know, that's not what we should put our hopes in. It has to come from these open source projects and wallet developers.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right, and well, I think we can end it. I don't want to take too much of your time. I think we got into about maybe 40 minutes here or so. You know, we had over 50 people in the live chat, and we had people, you know, in the regular chat, which it's a little bit late tonight. I tried to ask for questions to see if anybody had any questions, but this stuff gets a little technical, so we didn't have any questions tonight, Aaron. Usually we actually do have a couple, but I think people are a little bit baffled with some of this stuff. But, you know, this really is, you know, difficult things and difficult stuff to understand, you know, and I really encourage people to follow people like Aaron, who really focus on this stuff and are able to the point where they can write about it in long form, right? In long form. And that's what's really great. So make sure you pay attention to people like Aaron. I just want to thank you again, Aaron, so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your insights into this information. And again, I encourage everybody to read Bitcoin Magazine. But Aaron, please, why don't you tell us where we can find out more about you?
Best place to find me is probably on Twitter. So my handle is @Aaron Van W.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron. Again, we appreciate you coming on the show. We appreciate everybody watching live. We hope you guys learned something tonight. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you guys saw, definitely hit that thumbs up. And for the audio listeners, please, if you guys are listening to us and like what you hear, please hit that 5-star on the iTunes review. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We really hope you had a good time. We're going to come up with a lot more shows this week. We have, of course, the Q&A show coming up on Thursday. Of course, the Bitcoin News show on Sunday. So always something here on the CryptoCast Network for you guys to enjoy and learn from. So we hope you guys had a good time. And until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. See you guys later.